Years ago, I traded my hands for Claire Sterling's future. It also bought me a marriage that, to the outside world, seemed perfect. Decades later, in the sterile quiet of a private hospital room, Claire was on the verge of death. Ethan, I'm here, I answered softly. Her clouded eyes stared at the ceiling, as if seeing through the white plaster to a distant past. If you hadn't saved me, how much better would that have been? A tremor shot through me. I felt my eyes well up in front of our children. I thought she was heartbroken for me, mourning my ruined hands, feeling my pain even at the very end. But I didn't know. Her final thought wasn't pity for my sacrifice. It was a bone-deep regret, a lifetime of it, held under pressure until the very end. A violent lurch and a deafening roar tore me from that memory. I snapped my eyes open. I wasn't in a pristine hospital room. I was under a gray, hazy sky, choking on swirling dust. The air was filled with piercing screams, cries for help, and the sickening, muffled crunch of collapsing buildings. I froze, staring blankly at my own hands, caked in mud, but young, strong, and whole. I saw the blurs of green military uniforms and white medical coats rushing around me. This was the earthquake zone, the place that had been seared into my memory, the place that changed my entire life. I was back, reborn decades in the past, back to the day Claire was buried under the rubble and I had charged in without a second thought. The shock was so immense I couldn't think, but my body reacted before my mind could catch up. My eyes instantly locked onto a familiar pile of debris ahead. The temporary communications post for the military command, now just a mangled heap of concrete and rebar. Claire was under there. The memories of my first life flooded back like a tidal wave. I had saved her at the cost of the hands that would never again hold a surgical needle. In exchange, we had decades of a life lived together. She became a celebrated general, powerful and respected. I faded into the background, content to be her support. She was the high-ranking commanding officer, and I was the man everyone envied, the general's husband. But I had my own regrets. I watched my old army buddies achieve greatness while I lived a life of quiet mediocrity. I had envied them deeply. I wanted to shine like them, too. Given a second chance, what would I choose? Remembering how Claire, on her deathbed, was still heartbroken over my hands, I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward the rubble. My first life had its regrets, but I had never regretted saving her. This time, I would stand by that choice. I had to save her, no matter what. I dropped to my knees on a slab of concrete and began digging with my bare hands, ignoring the pain as my fingernails tore, my blood mixing with the grit. Claire, hang on. I yelled, my voice raw. I worked with a desperate speed, feeling no pain. A faint voice came from beneath the debris, strained with pain, but laced with a strange urgency. Ethan, is that you? Go, get away from here. I paused, thinking I'd misheard. She wanted me to leave? I hadn't heard that the first time. It's not safe. There are aftershocks. You have to get out of here. Claire's voice grew louder, filled with an unprecedented anger and a hint of fear. I gritted my teeth and dug faster. No, I have to get you out. I don't want you to save me. Just go. A sharp pain lanced through my chest. She was that desperate to prevent me from ruining my hands for her. I wanted to tell her, I'm back. I won't make the same mistakes. I won't let you carry that burden again. I dug even more frantically. Ethan, I'm begging you. Don't save me. Please. Her words stopped me cold. I lifted my head, and, through a crack between blocks of concrete, I met her eyes. Those eyes, once so bright and sharp, were now bloodshot, churning with a pain, a plea, a desperation I had never seen before. I don't want to live that life again. She gasped, her voice fading, but her words hit me like a sledgehammer. That life again? Which one? The decades we spent together. An icy chill snaked up my spine. I realized it then. Claire was reborn too, and she was so tormented by our life together that she'd rather die than repeat it. Her words sent a shock wave through me. I knelt there, stunned, my hands frozen in the rubble. Over here. Quick, there's someone under here. Another medical rescue team arrived. At the same moment I heard the shouts, I saw Claire's eyes, which had been dull with despair, suddenly ignite with a breathtaking light. She used every last bit of her strength to call out toward the new arrivals. Dr. Vance. Julian. I'm here. Julian? I turned my head stiffly and saw a tall, handsome doctor in a white coat running toward us. The way Claire looked at him made my heart clench again and again. It was the thrill of a long-awaited reunion, the devotion of finding something precious that had been lost. Julian sprinted over, not even glancing at me kneeling there. Captain Sterling, hang on. We'll have you out in a minute. I watched as the team quickly cleared the debris, soon freeing the upper half of Claire's trapped body. I watched the light in her eyes, a light that had no room for anyone else, and a heavy pressure settled in my chest. Just then, another violent aftershock hit. The ground bucked, and debris rained down from above. "Watch out!" Julian yelled, moving to shield Claire. But at the same instant, Claire, pinned from the waist down, unable to move, flung her arm up, desperately shielding the space above Julian's head. A fist-sized rock slammed into her arm with a dull thud. She grunted, her brow furrowed in pain, but she held her protective stance. I stared dumbfounded. In my first life, a rock of the same size in the same spot had fallen toward me as I dug frantically. Back then, she had only watched in terror, screaming my name, telling me to be careful. She hadn't thrown herself in the way. A person's instincts, I realized, never lie. "Look out!" I screamed. The massive support beam, the one that in my memory had finally crushed my hands, was dislodged by the tremor. It started to roll right toward Julian. "Julian!" I saw Claire practically roar his name. Ignoring the risk of being crushed further, her slender body summoned a terrifying strength. She twisted violently, using her own back to shove the panicked Julian into a small crevice between her and the debris, shielding him completely. The beam scraped down her spine before crashing to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust that nearly swallowed them both. Claire let out a pained groan, her face instantly turning as white as a sheet, cold sweat beading on her forehead. She was hurt badly, a woman creating a shield for that man. But she was smiling, a warm, contented smile. I stood frozen, watching that stinging scene through the dust, my eyes burning uncontrollably. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, the pain so intense I could barely breathe. So, that was it. Claire's final regret wasn't for my lost career. It was the fact that my sacrifice had forced her to marry me, becoming an insurmountable wall between her and Julian Vance. The man she had always wanted to spend her life with was never me, Ethan Carter. She only married me because I had ruined my hands saving her. The truth hit me like a shard of glass. My first life was a joke. What I thought was a lifetime of mutual devotion was for her a prison, a lifetime of regret. I took a silent step back, then another, leaving the scene entirely to Julian. "Let her go," I thought. "This life, she can chase her light, and I will follow my dream." I didn't look back at Claire again. I turned and ran, decisively, toward other areas where help was needed. With the deep medical knowledge I'd accumulated in my past life and the healthy, agile hands I now possessed, I once again picked up the familiar, yet foreign, set of specialized filaments. Soon, the looks from those around me turned from skepticism to shock and gratitude. They saw me, a seemingly unassuming young man, deftly inserting the shimmering filaments into acupressure points with a steady, swift hand. Wounds that had been bleeding uncontrollably began to clot. Injured people, contorted in agony, slowly relaxed. The breathing of the near-dead stabilized under my care. All doubt melted away into sincere admiration. "Son, thank you so much. A minute ago, the pain in my leg was so bad I wanted to die. That thing you did, it's a miracle. Dr. Carter, Dr. Carter, my kid's fever broke. He's sleeping peacefully now." I worked tirelessly, sweat soaking the back of my shirt, my face smeared with grime, but my eyes grew brighter and brighter. That long-lost feeling of fulfillment, of saving lives through my own abilities, of realizing my own value. It washed away much of the pain Claire had inflicted. In my last life, I could only look up at my comrades as they earned their accolades and lived brilliant careers. I was once considered a rising star myself, but I ended up as the general's husband, a man people whispered was living off his wife. This life, with these hands I thought I'd lost forever, I would make myself shine. I would build a world for my own wife to stand in. The first wave of rescue efforts finally subsided. I had a moment to rest. A lifetime of devotion made it impossible for me to completely ignore Claire. I knew her injuries were serious this time, especially after taking the blow from that beam to protect Julian. Her spine and internal organs had likely sustained hidden damage. Without the right treatment and conditioning, she would likely suffer severe, long-term consequences that could jeopardize her entire career. In my past life, seeing how badly she was hurt, I had scoured the area for medicinal herbs. Enduring the throbbing pain in my own hands, I stayed up for nights on end, brewing the Carter family's ancestral bone-setting and muscle regeneration salve to treat her. At the time, Claire had looked at my bandaged hands and couldn't help but scold me. "Ethan, are you crazy? Have you forgotten about your hands?" This time, my hands were fine. Preparing the salve was much easier. It was evening when I found the temporary medical tent where Claire was staying. The dim yellow light of a kerosene lamp spilled out from within, and I could hear the faint murmur of conversation. "Stop calling me Captain Sterling. It sounds so formal. If it weren't for you, I might not have made it out of there alive." It was Claire's voice, noticeably gentle, a world away from the frantic tone she'd used when she rejected me. Julian's voice was steady. "Don't say that. Saving lives is my job. But that was so dangerous. How could you just use your body to block that rock?" Claire's voice was low but warm. "I wasn't thinking. I just saw I was about to hit you, and my mind went blank. It was instinct. Looking back now, I'm glad I did. You're a woman. I'm a man. It should be us doing things like that. You can't be so reckless with your own safety anymore. Seeing you hurt like this, if I had to do it over again, I'd do the same thing." Claire's voice cut in. Do it over again. She'd do the same thing. So in my last life, if I hadn't gotten to her first, that scene would have played out anyway. And here I was, ridiculously thinking she loved me, that she was heartbroken over my injured hands, that it haunted her until her dying day. That after she passed, I had followed her without a second thought. I took a deep breath, pushing down the bitter taste in my mouth, and finally pulled back the tent flap. The conversation inside stopped abruptly. Claire was propped up on a makeshift cot, and Julian was sitting by her side, checking her bandages. They both looked up at me. The softness on Claire's face, the one reserved for Julian, vanished in an instant. It was replaced by a polite, distant expression that was chillingly swift. Julian, on the other hand, frowned slightly, his eyes holding a trace of guarded scrutiny. I tried to keep my voice even. "Claire, this is a family salve. It's excellent for mending bones and healing tissue. You should use it." I held out the small ceramic jar. My fingernails were still torn from the day's digging, and my knuckles were white as I gripped the container. Claire's gaze rested on the old-fashioned jar for less than a second before flicking away. Her tone was flat. "Thank you for the thought, Sergeant Carter, but I don't need it. Dr. Vance is handling my treatment. I trust him." My hand froze in midair. Sergeant Carter. After decades together, we were back to being such formal comrades. My outstretched hand was trapped. Pulling it back was awkward, but leaving it there was even worse. Claire seemed completely oblivious to my discomfort, her eyes refusing to meet mine. "This must be very valuable. You should give it to someone who needs it more. One Sergeant Carter, one someone who needs it more." She drew a clear, sharp line between our decades of shared history and our current distance. I felt a hot flush creep up my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment, disappointment, and the cold sting of anger at having my kindness thrown back in my face, at her haste to sever all ties. I could even feel Julian's gaze on me, a look that was part pity, part Victor's appraisal. I slowly withdrew my hand, my fingers clenching around the cool jar. "Sorry to bother you," I said quietly, then turned and walked quickly out of the tent, fleeing the scene of my humiliation. From inside, I faintly heard Julian's steady voice. He meant well. "That was a little harsh, wasn't it?" Followed by Claire's cheerful but clear reply. "That's exactly why I can't accept it. I can't let him get the wrong idea. It would just cause unnecessary trouble." I didn't have the heart to listen anymore. So, in this new life, I had already become her trouble. But in the disaster zone, aftershocks were frequent. The shrill blast of whistles and shouts for help called me back to reality, leaving me little time to lick my wounds. I had just closed my medical kit when an urgent cry came from the distance. "Dr. Carter! Dr. Carter! We got a kid over here, ruptured aorta." "Coming." I wiped the grime from my face and sprinted toward the new rescue point without hesitation. Not long after I left, Claire, due to the severity of her injuries and her father's concern about lasting effects, arrangements were made for her to be transferred back to the better-equipped military hospital at Fort Sheridan. At her request, Command granted special permission for Julian to accompany her. As the helicopter carrying Claire and Julian lifted off, I was kneeling in the ruins, carefully performing an emergency procedure on a soldier whose leg had been impaled by a steel rod. Sweat trickled down my temples, mixing with blood and dust, but I was completely oblivious. "Doc, I'm okay. Go help the others," the female soldier said, her voice trembling but firm. I didn't even look up. "There are other doctors in other areas." "Is my leg gone?" she asked. I deftly inserted a filament to stop the bleeding. "Don't worry. Trust me. You'll keep your leg. Now that I have these hands back, I'm going to make sure they're put to the best possible use." Amidst the daily chaos and countless expressions of "thank you, Dr. Carter," the part of my heart that ached for Claire was slowly being filled, expanded, and fortified. There were too many people here who needed saving. This was where I was meant to be. The old commanding general saw me with my hands covered in blood, still administering treatment, and couldn't help but praise me. "Ethan, you're incredible." I just smiled and nodded. I was going to make up for all of last life's regrets. With the military and civilian rescuers working as one, the disaster was finally brought under control. The situation stabilized, and the troops returned home as heroes. For my outstanding performance, I received a commendation from the military command. Sergeant Ethan Carter, disregarding his own safety to save the wounded, has demonstrated the noble character of a revolutionary military medic. The words of the presenting officer echoed across the parade ground. The applause from below was thunderous. I stood there, a red ribbon pinned to my chest, a medal in my hand, feeling proud and gratified. In my past life, I could only watch as others receive their glory. This life, that glory, that light was finally shining on me. After returning to the base hospital, I would occasionally hear the nurses talking about Claire. They always mentioned how close she and Julian had suddenly become. Whenever they saw me, the conversation would halt abruptly. I just pretended not to notice. In my last life, even with my best efforts, Claire had been left with chronic pain. Her back would ache on rainy days. This time, she had worsened her injuries by shielding Julian from the falling beam. Claire was an excellent soldier. In my past life, it took her 20 years to become a general, and she made immense contributions to the country. I knew how effective my family's salve was. It would have helped her immensely. And with my hands uninjured this time, it wouldn't have been impossible to ensure she made a full recovery. With that thought, I went to her hospital room. My hand was raised to knock when the conversation from inside stopped me. I heard Ethan won a commendation in the disaster zone. It was Julian's voice, with an unmistakable note of disappointment. "If I come back a few days later, maybe—" "Don't think like that." Claire's voice was gentle but firm. "Your skill doesn't need a medal to prove it. Trust me, I'll help you reach even greater heights, where you can receive the glory you deserve." My fingers curled slightly. They had made it official that quickly. Julian's voice held a trace of bitterness. But that was a commendation from the high command. Claire chuckled softly. "You want honors? When I'm better, we'll hit the training grounds. I'll earn them for you, fair and square. The man I'm with deserves to stand on the highest podium for everyone to see. I'm the man. I don't need my woman to earn things for me." Julian's voice trailed off, but you could tell he was pleased. "When I'm recovered, will you marry me?" I felt like I was intruding. I slowly lowered my hand and turned to leave. "Who's there?" Claire's sharp voice stopped me in my tracks. I had no choice but to turn back and push open the slightly ajar door. "It's me, Ethan." The two people in the room looked at me with varying expressions. A flash of discomfort crossed Julian's face before he schooled it back to normal. Claire, however, frowned slightly, her tone distant. "Sergeant Carter, can I help you?" She used to call me Ethan. Now, it was one Sergeant Carter after another. I really wasn't used to it. I got straight to the point. "I came to check on your injuries. What you sustained is unusual, especially the spinal concussion and internal trauma. If it's not properly treated, it could lead to chronic problems in the future." "Thank you for your concern," Claire interrupted, her voice cool. "My recovery is going very well. Julian's an excellent doctor. I trust him completely." I persisted. "Claire, I'm not questioning Dr. Vance's ability. It's just that my family's medical techniques are more specialized for these kinds of internal injuries. If you'd let me take a look, maybe I could." "Sergeant Carter." Claire cut me off again, her frown deepening. "I thought I made myself clear before. I trust Julian, and we're getting engaged soon. To avoid any misunderstandings, please keep your distance. I don't want my fiancée to get the wrong idea and cause any unnecessary trouble." I could hardly believe Claire was capable of saying something like that. Even if we weren't going to be husband and wife, we had grown up in the same military compound, friends since childhood. Was she really going to cut ties so completely? Claire wasn't finished. "I know my own body, and I trust my future husband. If any problems do arise, I'll bear the consequences myself." Future husband, bear the consequences myself. But I was afraid she couldn't afford to bear them. I tried again. "Claire, I only came because our families are old friends and we grew up together. I don't have any other intentions. You know, my family's medical background is unique, especially when it comes to trauma." "There's no need to go to the trouble," Claire said, a hint of impatience in her voice. "I've told you, I know my own body. We grew up together, and I've always seen you as a younger brother, but you're not my actual brother. If you have so much free time, Sergeant Carter, perhaps you should focus on other soldiers. I have Julian here, and that's all I need. Claire, I just don't want you to have any lasting injuries. You don't have to be in such a rush to refuse." Claire scowled. "Sergeant Carter, Whether or not I have lasting injuries has nothing to do with you. You'd be better off focusing on other patients. Now please leave, I need to rest. The humiliation was overwhelming. I just wanted to help her avoid a lifetime of pain, but to reassure Julian, she was desperate to draw a line between us. I looked at her unwavering expression, then at the silent Julian standing beside her. In the end, all my words dissolved into a bitter curve on my lips. I turned and left, gently closing the door behind me. As I walked down the hall, I faintly heard Julian's worried voice from the room. Don't you think that was too harsh? The whole base is saying he's in love with you. Then came Claire's reply, calm to the point of being cold. Just because he loves me, does that mean I have to love him back? You know you're the only one I love. I'm doing this so he doesn't get any funny ideas and end up making you angry. I leaned against the cool wall, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. 2 lifetimes of feelings still made my chest feel tight. Just because he loves me, does that mean I have to love him back? Funny ideas. Making you angry. Fine. This settled it. From now on, we would be strangers. I never denied that Claire was an exceptional woman. She had the tenacity of a man, with a woman's sharp intuition. In my last life, even though she loved Julian, she had ruthlessly suppressed her feelings after we married and shared a life of mutual respect with me. I hadn't discovered she had another man in her heart until the day she died. So this time, her rejection was swift and absolute. She was afraid I would cling to her. So she was giving Julian a profound sense of security. I could understand that. I saw it clearly now. In our last life, no one was wronged. It was just a matter of choices. This life, since Claire had made hers, I could only wish her well. I sought out Julian in private and handed him the salve I had made. Dr. Vance, this is a family recipe. It will help with Claire's injuries. She doesn't want to accept it from me, but I know you care about her health. So, before I could finish, Julian cut me off. Dr. Carter, I'm taking care of Claire's health. You don't need to worry about it. I hope you'll keep your distance from her in the future. Don't be so concerned. You know, sometimes your concern can be a burden to others. His words were humiliating, but I remained calm. I'm just acting out a doctor's sense of duty. I'd hate to see a brilliant soldier's future. Enough. A smirk played on Julian's lips. Duty? There are plenty of patients in this hospital. How come I don't see you being so dutiful to anyone else? Ethan, we're all adults here. Let's not pretend. Claire and I are together now. I want you to keep your distance so people don't start gossiping, saying that I stole my esteemed colleague's girl. Your family is well off. Maybe you don't care about reputation. But my parents taught me to never interfere in other people's relationships. You should save yourself for someone who needs it. Claire has me for everything. Looking at Julian's handsome but wary face, I suddenly felt tired. But I still pushed the jar into his hand. Don't worry. I'm not interested in Claire. I'm genuinely trying to help. If you really love her, let her try it. Don't leave her with any regrets. With that, I turned and left, not waiting to see his reaction. I didn't know that Julian glanced at the jar in his hand, sneered, and tossed it into the nearest trash can. Having given him the salve, my conscience was clear. I finally felt a sense of peace. Over the weekend, I finally had time to go back to the base housing compound to see my parents. Before I even reached my own front door, a warm voice called out to me. Ethan, oh, it's so good to see you. Mrs. Sterling, Claire's mother, was carrying a basket of groceries and hurried over. She grabbed my arm without a second thought, looking me up and down. Look at these dark circles. You must be exhausted from working at the hospital. You've lost weight. Come over for dinner tonight. I'm making my ginseng chicken soup to help you get your strength back. Before, this affection would have made me happy. Now it just felt awkward. I forced a smile. Mrs. Sterling, you really don't have to. What's with all the formality? She chided, cutting me off. I've known you since you were in diapers. Are you going to start acting like a stranger now that you're grown up? As I was trying to figure out how to refuse, a familiar voice came from behind me. Mom, my body stiffened. I turned slowly. Claire was standing a short distance away, leaning on a cane. Beside her, Julian was carefully supporting her arm. The moment our eyes met, the air seemed to freeze. The smile on Mrs. Sterling's face vanished, and she shot Julian a look of displeasure. Claire hobbled over to her mother. Her eyes flickered over me without pausing and went straight to her mother. Mom, this is Julian, my boyfriend. Then she gently took Julian's hand. Julian, this is my mother. Julian stepped forward, looking a little nervous. Ma'am, it's a pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Sterling's expression shifted rapidly. She looked at her daughter, then at Julian, and finally her gaze landed back on me, her hand reflexively clutching my sleeve. Seeing her mother's reaction, Claire frowned. Mom, Sergeant Carter has things to do. You shouldn't keep him. Besides, this is the first time I'm bringing my boyfriend home. It's not appropriate to have an outsider here. Mrs. Sterling had been trying to maintain her composure, but her daughter's words sent a chill through her. Even if she had a new boyfriend, how could she treat me, the boy she grew up with, like this? Especially when she had always considered me her future son-in-law. Claire, what are you talking about? What outsider? Ethan is not an outsider in this house. And why are you calling him Sergeant Carter? You always used to call him Ethan. What's going on with you two? And him? Before Mrs. Sterling could finish, I quickly interrupted, using the opportunity to pull my sleeve free. Mrs. Sterling, I haven't seen my parents in a while. I should get going. Ethan, wait. Mrs. Sterling tried to stop me, but I had already turned, practically fleeing toward my own yard. I could faintly hear Mrs. Sterling's voice, tight with anger. Claire, what do you think you're doing? Are you trying to kill me? You and Ethan? Mom, I love Julian, not Ethan. From now on, don't link me and Ethan together. It will give Julian the wrong idea. The iron gate clicked shut, sealing out all the awkwardness. I looked at the familiar yard, smelled the comforting aroma of dinner, and shouted, Mom, Dad, I'm home. Home from a past life. After that day, rumors began to spread through the compound. Did you hear? The Sterling girl brought a boyfriend home, but her mom wouldn't even let him in the door. If you ask me, the hospital director's son is so much better. He and Claire are childhood sweethearts, and his family is full of doctors. Mrs. Sterling always treated him like her own son. I know, right? I was there. When Mrs. Sterling saw that Dr. Vance, her face turned green. It's obvious how Ethan felt about her. We all thought they were a sure thing. Then this other guy comes out of nowhere. These whispers inevitably reached my ears. I could only put on a brave face and pretend I didn't hear them. I suppose I deserved it. At this point in time, I had been completely devoted to Claire. I would have done anything to make her happy. The whole compound knew how I felt. But now Claire was getting married, and the groom was Julian. So in everyone's eyes, I was the one who had been dumped. It was impossible not to feel a little awkward. Fortunately, after several decades, I had developed a thick skin. To avoid any unnecessary trouble, I did my best to stay away from Claire and Julian. But some encounters were unavoidable. Judging by Julian's posture, I knew this wasn't an accident. He had been waiting for me. Julian's face was grim, his tone even less friendly than before. Ethan, what's your game? You promised me you'd stop pursuing Claire. So why are you pulling these tricks behind her back, turning her mother against us? I frowned. I think you're mistaken. I have never said a single word to Mrs. Sterling to oppose your relationship. Julian scoffed. Mistaken? The whole compound is saying Mrs. Sterling only accepts you as her son-in-law. If you weren't whispering in her ear, why would she be so hostile toward me? Was it my fault that Claire's mother didn't like him? I was at a loss for words. Dr. Vance, I'm a very busy man. I don't have time to get involved in your business with the Sterlings. If Mrs. Sterling doesn't like you, you should probably look at yourself for the reason instead of coming to bother me. Julian's voice dripped with sarcasm. You say you're not involved, so why is it that every time I visit Mrs. Sterling, she brings you up? Ethan was always so well-behaved. Ethan's such a brilliant doctor. Ethan, if you're going to do something, at least have the guts to admit it. You act all magnanimous in front of Claire to win her favor. Then you goad her mother into putting me down. What exactly are you trying to do? I snorted. Is Mrs. Sterling wrong? I was a well-behaved kid, and I'm a good doctor. What's wrong with an elder complimenting a junior? Are you going to cause trouble for me just because she praised me? Dr. Carter, I don't want to be rude, but the fact is, if you weren't clinging to Claire, Mrs. Sterling wouldn't have this misunderstanding. If it weren't for you, she would never be so critical of me. His accusation almost made me laugh. Dr. Vance, I've told you, my relationship with Claire is purely that of comrades in arms. What happens between you two has nothing to do with me. If you insist on believing I'm scheming behind your back, then I have nothing more to say. With that, I try to walk around him. Stop right there. Julian raised his voice, causing passing medical staff to turn and stare. Ethan, I want you to remember your place. Claire and I have already applied for a marriage license. She's my fiancée. For now on, I want you to stay away from her and her family. Do not show your face in front of them again. I was getting angry. Dr. Vance, even if you're Claire's husband, I've lived in that compound for 20 years. Are you telling me I can't go back to my own home just to avoid her family? What gives you the right to order me around? I had backed down again and again, but they kept pushing. They really thought Ethan Carter was a pushover. I turned to leave, only to see Claire standing right behind me. She looked at me, her eyes cold. Sergeant Carter, I was wrong before. When you were pursuing me, I wasn't clear enough in my rejection. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. Now that Julian and I are getting married, I ask that you show him the respect he deserves. My face fell instantly. I was furious. I was just stating a fact. What right did Julian have to tell me what to do? But Claire had said that. She couldn't have been unaware of what her words implied. They implied that I, Ethan Carter, was shameless, that I was harassing her. What piece of work she was. To stand up for Julian, she was willing to drag my name through the mud. Our families were so close. I never imagined Claire would leave me with no dignity at all. As the onlookers pointed and whispered, I felt a wave of intense humiliation. Yes, at this point in my life, I was in love with Claire, and everyone in the compound knew it. But since my rebirth, I had kept my distance. I could honestly say I had done nothing to wrong them. So why were they hounding me? Even with the lingering affection I had for her, I was angry. Captain Sterling, I'd also like you to understand something. When I used to follow you around, it was because we were from the same compound. I saw you as a younger sister. Since you seem to feel that I'm a nuisance, don't worry. From now on, you and I are strangers. When you get married, I will sincerely wish you a long and happy life together. And I'd ask that the two of you stop trying to make a scene in front of me. Hearing this, Claire was taken aback. She had always known I liked her. Her lack of rejection might have been out of respect for our family's friendship, or perhaps she had some affection for me. Maybe after living a whole life with me, she felt it wasn't as fulfilling as she had hoped, leading to her past life's regrets. This time, judging by her resolute attitude, I knew she would never make the same mistake. Hearing my harsh words, Claire felt an inexplicable discomfort, but she quickly suppressed it. This was what she wanted after all. She would not live with regrets again. She looked at me and spoke again. If we've bothered you, we apologize. You know my mother. She's had some misunderstandings about Julian lately because of some rumors, and her attitude hasn't been great. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. I know this might not be your intention. Claire took a deep breath. But could you please find an opportunity to speak with my mother and make things clear? Ask her to stop trying to pair us up. It's causing Julian a lot of distress and pressure. I looked at her furrowed brow, at the way she worried about another man, and suddenly found it laughable. Not only was she defending Julian, but she was also throwing me under the bus for him. The implication was clear. It was my fault her mother was giving Julian a hard time. In her mind, the fact that her mother liked me was also my fault. My very existence was a source of trouble for Julian. So this was how she could protect someone. I wanted so badly to tell her that I had been reborn too, that in my last life, I had given up everything for her. And this time, I had no intention of doing it again, no intention of getting entangled with her. But in the end, I swallowed the words. I just nodded. Fine, I understand. Claire seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, but also looked a little guilty. She added, thank you. And what happened before is in the past. We should both move on with our lives. Yes, it's all in the past. I repeated her words. Captain Sterling, Dr. Vance, is there anything else? If not, I have patience to see. Seeing my distant attitude, Claire's lips moved, but she said nothing. She turned and left with Julian leaning on her cane. Watching her slightly unsteady back, which overlapped with the confident figure from my past life, I smiled faintly. Claire, once the piece is played, you can't take it back. You have to look forward. Don't ever regret this. I'm a man of my word. Since I had agreed, I picked a time and made a special trip to the Sterling's home. When Mrs. Sterling saw me, she was overjoyed. Ethan, come in, sit down. I just made some white fungus soup. Let me get you a bowl. Mrs. Sterling, please don't trouble yourself. I stopped her, my tone serious. I came today because there's something I need to make clear to you. Seeing my serious expression, Mrs. Sterling seemed to sense something. The smile on her face faded slightly. What is it, Ethan? You look so serious. I looked directly into her eyes, my voice clear and firm. Ma'am, I know you've always been very fond of me, treating me like a son. I've always respected you deeply. But, regarding Claire and me, I think there may have been some misunderstanding. Mrs. Sterling pressed her lips together, not responding. Claire and I grew up together, and I cherish our friendship as comrades. But my feelings for her have only ever been those of a brother for a sister. Nothing more. I enunciated each word clearly. Not in the past, not now, and certainly not in the future. Mrs. Sterling couldn't help but interject, but Ethan, you used to... I cut her off with a smile. That was when I was young and foolish. Now, Claire has found someone she truly loves, and I am genuinely happy for her. Dr. Vance is a good man. They're a great match. I leaned forward and took her hand. Ma'am, I ask that you please stop trying to set me up with Claire. It's not fair, Dr. Vance, and for me, it's also become a burden. Mrs. Sterling was stunned. Surprise and disappointment flashed across her face, finally settling into a long sigh. Ethan, you... Are you being serious? I nodded. Absolutely. Mrs. Sterling, you will always be an elder I respect, and I'm grateful for your kindness. But you can't force matters of the heart. I want Claire to be happy, and her happiness clearly lies with Dr. Vance. Mrs. Sterling was silent for a long time before she finally said slowly, I understand. It was me. I was mistaken. But you can't let this distance you from me. When did I start to like Claire? It felt like it was when I was very young. Mrs. Sterling would tease me again and again, asking, Ethan, honey, will you be my son-in-law someday? After hearing it enough times, I think I started to believe it. Leaving the Sterling's house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sun warm and bright. I had finally, with my own hands, severed this last unnecessary tie. After our frank conversation, Mrs. Sterling, though disappointed, stopped deliberately trying to push me and Claire together. But the visits between our two families became less frequent. When we occasionally met in the compound, Mrs. Sterling would still smile and greet me. Ethan, off to work? But the excessive warmth was gone, replaced by a polite distance. I actually found this much more comfortable. Yes, Mrs. Sterling, we have a difficult case consultation today. I would always reply politely before hurrying off to the hospital. Sometimes in the hospital garden, I would see Claire and Julian walking together from a distance. Julian would carefully support her as they whispered to each other, their faces glowing with happiness. Claire, the doctor said if you keep up with your physical therapy for another 2 months, you'll be able to ditch the cane. Yes, thanks to you being here with me. When I heard snippets of their conversation, I would simply and calmly walk the other way. My heart no longer stirred at such scenes. My world was now filled to the brim with needles, medical texts, and patients. During the day, I saw patients. At night, I organized my family's ancestral medical records. Combining the experience from my past life with the practice of this one, I began writing clinical insights into microfilament therapy. Having seen the decline of traditional medicine in the future, I also discussed with my father the possibility of donating our family's proprietary formulas to the country. After careful consideration, he finally agreed. Not only that, but I also lobbied other families with deep medical traditions to collaborate on a compendium of our collective knowledge, striving to promote and advance the field. I was spinning like a top, yet I remained dedicated to my post. Dr. Carter, the protocol for this case. A young intern asked humbly, holding a patient file. Pay close attention to the depth and angle of insertion here. I explained patiently, the golden filaments in my hand gleaming softly under the light. Life was busy and fulfilling. The troubles concerning Claire had finally faded into a distant memory. Time flowed by like water. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. That spring, the military command decided to hold a major women's joint services competition. In the mess hall, the female soldiers were all buzzing about it. I heard this competition is tied to a promotion slot. Captain Sterling will definitely be competing, right? She's the best we've got. The girl gave a thumbs up. Our Captain Torres is no slouch either. I walked past with my meal tray, paying no mind to the chatter. In my past life, Claire had made a name for herself in this very competition, taking first place by a huge margin and earning an extraordinary promotion. From then on, her career had been a smooth ascent. But in this life, none of that had anything to do with me. I heard Claire's recovery was going well. Her cast was off, and she was training intensely. Julian was a good partner, jogging with her around the track every day. This life, Claire would achieve her fame, and I, too, would shine brightly. On the day of the competition, I was part of the medical support team, standing by at the aid station with other medical personnel. I skillfully inventoried the first aid supplies, seemingly oblivious to the roaring excitement from the field. When it was time for Claire's team to compete, I still found my eyes drawn to the field. Even after a severe injury, standing at the starting line, she was as impressive as ever. The events proceeded one by one. Claire's performance was initially stellar, her fitness and skills showcasing her solid fundamentals. In the stands, Julian nervously clenched his fists, his eyes filled with pride. However, when they reached the obstacle course, which required high-intensity weight-bearing and explosive movements, something went wrong. After leaping over a high wall and landing, Claire's face suddenly changed. Her movements became visibly sluggish and distorted. She tried to force herself to continue, but the next obstacle, a low crawl under barbed wire, demanded immense core and leg strength. The moment she dropped to the ground, she let out a suppressed cry of pain, her body involuntarily curling up. Cold sweat instantly beaded on her forehead. Acting on professional instinct, I immediately grabbed my medical kit and ran over. It's a relapse of her old injury. She needs to be evacuated immediately. I made a calm assessment, helping the other medics lift her onto a stretcher. The crowd erupted in shock. No one had expected the top contender to fall so dramatically during the competition. I stood at the aid station, watching the stretcher being carried away, my gaze serene. I remember my past life. After Claire's injury, I was the one who had used my family's secret methods to carefully nurse her back to health, allowing her to recover in a short time, even becoming stronger than before. But this life, the salve I offered was refused, and my subsequent recommendations for checks and treatment were ignored. Perhaps this was fate. Everyone had to take responsibility for their own choices. The news of Claire's failure in the competition and the relapse of her old injury quickly spread throughout the command. After a more detailed examination at the hospital, the prognosis was not optimistic. Her previous injury had never fully healed, and the extreme physical stress of the competition had caused irreversible damage. The doctor's diagnosis: she was no longer fit for service in a high-intensity, high-risk combat unit. This news was a devastating blow to the Sterling family. Claire's father, the command's chief of staff, was a lifelong soldier who had placed high hopes on his daughter. Her mother was frantic. That night, I had just gotten home when my parents called me into the living room. On the sofa sat General and Mrs. Sterling, their faces etched with worry. My father began, "Ethan, your uncle and Aunt Sterling are here because they wanted to ask me for a favor, and your medical skills are far beyond mine now." He didn't finish, but I understood. I sat down calmly. Mrs. Sterling immediately grabbed my hand, tears welling up before she even spoke. "Ethan, I know Claire was wrong about some things in the past, but this time, you have to help her. She can't leave the service. It's her life." General Sterling looked equally grave. "We heard that your family's ancestral medical techniques might still offer a solution. Could you please take another look at Claire? Even if there's just a sliver of hope, we don't want to give up." All eyes were on me. My father looked at me too. "Ethan, what do you think?" Since Claire and Julian had gotten together, my father had been holding in his frustration, remarking to me how unfairly Claire had acted. She hadn't rejected me when I pursued her, but in the end, she brought home Julian, drew a clear line, and subjected me to that humiliation. No father likes to see his son cast aside. But business was business, and he'd also watched Claire grow up. He didn't want her military career to end here either, especially since she truly loved being a soldier. My medical skills had surpassed his over the past year, so even though he knew I might not be willing, he asked anyway. I was silent for a moment, looking at the eager faces of my parents and the Sterlings. Then I spoke slowly. "General, Mrs. Sterling, Mom, Dad, it's not that I'm unwilling to help. It's just—" I paused, meeting their gazes, my tone calm but firm. "Captain Sterling's injury. The optimal window for treatment has passed. I can't guarantee I can cure her." The title Captain Sterling made everyone in the room flinch. They knew we had grown distant, but they hadn't realized how distant. General and Mrs. Sterling's faces turned pale. "A doctor's duty is to heal. Naturally, I hope to cure every patient." I continued, my voice devoid of complaint, just stating facts. "But treatment requires trust and cooperation between the doctor and the patient. Captain Sterling and Dr. Vance, they don't seem to trust me or my family's medical practices. Forcing my involvement would not only be ineffective, but would likely cause unnecessary misunderstandings and conflicts." I stood up and bowed slightly to General and Mrs. Sterling. "I'm sorry, sir, ma'am. I can't help you with this. Please understand." With that, I turned and went back to my room, not looking at their complex expressions. Closing the door, I shut out the sighs and whispers from the living room. I knew my actions might seem cold, but having lived 2 lives, I saw things clearly. Claire's injury required a long-term treatment process, and I didn't want to be tied to her again. Claire's path was her own to walk, and my path, Ethan Carter's path, was just beginning. The next day, after my parents' repeated urging, I accompanied my father to Claire's hospital room. I knew I was doing it out of respect for our family's long friendship. So be it. I had to get my parents' face. Claire lay in the hospital bed, her face ashen, the sharp light in her eyes replaced by a hollow emptiness. Julian held her hand tightly, his own eyes full of worry. "Claire, don't worry. Your uncle's family has a legacy of medicine. There must be a way," Julian whispered comfortingly. Claire just closed her eyes, her tightly pressed lips betraying her inner despair. My father carefully examined her injury, pressing here and there, asking questions, then checking her pulse with deep concentration. I stood quietly by his side, assisting and taking notes. "Does it hurt here?" Yes. Any numbness in your leg? Yes. After the examination, my father washed his hands, his brow deeply furrowed. I then performed my own thorough check. As I did, Claire finally opened her eyes and looked at me with a glimmer of hope. I finished my detailed examination, looked at my father, and gently shook my head. Seeing this, Claire closed her eyes in despair. Mrs. Sterling knew the answer, but she couldn't help asking, David, how is she? Claire, could she get better? Everyone's heart was in their throat. Claire's injury, my father began slowly, was neglected for too long. If, 6 months ago, right after it happened, we could have used our family's proprietary needle therapy to clear the blockages, combined with our specialized salve both externally and internally to strengthen her system, she might have made a full recovery with no lasting effects. He paused, and, as the Sterling's faces changed color, he continued, but now, the tissues in the injured area have formed adhesions, and the internal damage is set. All I can do now is try my best to use acupuncture and medication to alleviate her pain and improve some function. But to recover to the point where she can withstand the high-intensity training of a combat unit, I'm afraid that's impossible. The word impossible landed like a sledgehammer on everyone's heart. Mrs. Sterling's face went white, and she swayed, nearly collapsing. General Sterling seemed to age 10 years in an instant. Tears welled up in Julian's eyes. How could this be? Claire! Suddenly, Mrs. Sterling looked up, her eyes locking onto me. Ethan, you were there. You were at the disaster site back then. You could have saved her. You had the ability, so why? Why didn't you treat her? Her voice rose sharply, laced with anger and accusation. Was it because she was going to marry Julian, so you deliberately let her go untreated? You just watched as her future was ruined? I treated you like my own son. How could you not save her? How could you? Her words exploded in the room like a thunderclap. General Sterling looked at his wife in shock, then at me. Julian stopped crying, his gaze complicated as it shifted to me. Even Claire on the hospital bed snapped her eyes open and stared at me, her expression filled with disbelief and a deep, profound pain. Every gaze in the room converged on me like a spotlight, filled with desperate questions, hidden suspicions, and anguished struggles. I stood there, enduring it all. I remembered Claire's resolute rejection under the rubble, the jar of sal she pushed away in the tent, the cold line she drew outside her hospital room, the way she threw herself in front of Julian to block the falling rock, the matter-of-fact way she had asked me to clear up her mother's misunderstanding, the kindness of a past life, the resentment of this one, decades of mutual respect, a year of being strangers. I slowly raised my head, my gaze calm as it swept over Mrs. Sterling's agitated, distorted face, past General Sterling's pained expression, past Julian's conflicted look, and finally rested on the face of the woman on the bed who had been entangled with me for 2 lifetimes. I smiled faintly. I tried to save her. My calm declaration, I tried to save her, was like a bucket of ice water, instantly freezing the heated atmosphere of accusation in the room. Mrs. Sterling's mouth hung open, as if to say more, but my next words stopped her short. But Captain Sterling thought I was harassing her and refused my help time and again. I also went to Dr. Vance and asked him to persuade her to try my salve, but it seems they never used it. If Captain Sterling had trusted me just once, perhaps she wouldn't be in this situation. My gaze flickered over to Claire, her face pale on the bed. As for the details, you should ask her yourselves. She knows best. With that, I turned to my father. Dad, let's go. My father sighed and patted my shoulder. The two of us walked out of the room, ignoring the varied stares from behind. After the door closed, a dead silence filled the room. Mrs. Sterling whipped around to face her daughter, her voice trembling. Claire, is he telling the truth? Was it you? You who didn't want him to save you? Claire closed her eyes, her chest heaving, but she didn't say a word. Mrs. Sterling then turned to Julian. Ethan said he gave you the salve. Did you ever give it to my daughter or not? Julian's eyes darted away, and he too remained silent. Why didn't you give it to her? Why? It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, how could my daughter have ended up like this? As Mrs. Sterling lunged at Julian, Claire's eyes shot open. Mom, don't. It was me who refused Ethan's salve. I refused his examination, and I told Julian not to use it. It was all me. Her voice was hoarse but clear. It was me. I was arrogant enough to think my body was fine. I didn't want to be indebted to him, to give him any more wrong ideas. The responsibility is mine alone. It has nothing to do with Julian or anyone else. She was indeed a woman who was a match for any man. Even at this point, she didn't shirk responsibility, and she protected Julian. Mrs. Sterling collapsed into a chair, sobbing into her hands. She finally understood. It wasn't that I wouldn't save her. It was her own daughter who had thrown away her future. Claire lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling. Who didn't she want to rage at? At fate for its cruel joke, at herself for her foolishness, at the damned, uncontrollable feelings that had led her here. But who could she blame? Ethan? He had done nothing wrong. Julian? He was even more innocent. She had planted the seeds of this bitter fruit herself, and now she had no choice but to swallow it. After we left the room, my father walked in silence for a while before letting out a heavy sigh. Ethan, from now on, maybe it's best to keep your distance from the Sterlings. He felt I had been wronged. I had acted with the best intentions, only to be suspected and accused like that. I nodded, my heart surprisingly calm. I know, Dad. Claire's military career finally came to an end. The command considered transferring her to a desk job, but she refused. Let me sit in an office all day and watch others train, Claire said with a bitter smile. I can't do it. Julian held her hand. Claire, whatever you decide, I'll support you. I may not be some big shot, but I firmly believe that I, Claire Sterling, can make a name for myself anywhere. She said this to her worried parents, her eyes holding the weariness of her injury, but also a flame of defiance that refused to be extinguished. Not long after, Claire and Julian got married. The wedding was a grand affair, with nearly everyone in the compound invited. Red decorations, celebratory music, a house full of guests, and endless congratulations. Claire wore a beautiful gown, her figure still elegant and tall, but a closer look revealed that the sharp, martial spirit in her eyes was gone, replaced by a touch of melancholy. Julian, in his groom's attire, was all smiles, standing by her side. I received an invitation, and I went. Sitting among the guests, I watched the couple on the stage. I remember my past life, when Claire hadn't wanted a big ceremony. We had just gone to the courthouse to get our license, without even a reception. At the time, I thought it was about revolutionary simplicity. Now, I realized it was probably because the man she was marrying wasn't the one she loved, so she couldn't be bothered with the fuss. In contrast, her love for Julian in this life was truly passionate. The wedding was lively. I quietly finished my meal, left a respectable gift, and slipped away. Everything from the past was now, officially, in the past. Claire's wedding was the talk of the compound for a while, but it gradually faded. Amidst the gossip, my own parents started pressuring me to get married. Ethan, my mother said at dinner, her tone commanding, you have to settle down this year. I kept my head down, shoveling rice into my mouth. Mom, I'm busy with a research project right now. I don't have time to think about other things. But you're 25, my father put down his chopsticks, frowning. The gossip in the compound is getting worse. They're saying all sorts of things. Your mother is just worried about you. I had heard the rumors too, that I was still hung up on Claire, and that's why I was single. Could I go out and explain that I just wanted to focus on my career? Looking at my parents' graying hair, I swallowed the words of refusal. In this era, unlike the future, an unmarried man was destined to face a lot of criticism. One evening, my father came back from a meeting with a rare smile on his face. Ethan, come here. I got good news for you. He mysteriously pulled out a photograph. This is Maya Torres. She's also in the Special Operations Group. She took first place in the women's competition this year. She's a great girl. Do you want to meet her? Maya Torres? I was stunned. I remember that name. In my past life, Claire had mentioned her, calling her a rare talent. In this life, she had taken first place. Just this small deviation of fate sparked my curiosity. I agreed to meet her. The meeting was arranged at a park. On a weekend, the park was full of weeping willows. From a distance, I saw a slender figure standing by a pavilion, poised and graceful. Maya smiled at me, and her smile was dazzling. Dr. Carter, I'm Maya Torres. Up close, she was even more striking than in the photo. As we walked along the lake, Maya gradually opened up. Dr. Carter, we've actually met before. Oh, at the earthquake disaster site, she said, her eyes warm. A steel rod went through my leg. You're the one who saved me, who saved my leg. It suddenly came back to me. She had been in so much pain, sweating profusely, her voice trembling, yet she had insisted I go help other casualties first. And this, Maya pulled a small ceramic jar from her pocket. Do you remember it? I froze. It was the very same jar of salve Claire had rejected. That day you rushed over, stuffed this into my hand, and then ran off to save someone else, Maya said, rubbing the jar, her voice filled with gratitude. This stuff is miraculous. My injury healed incredibly fast. If it weren't for this, I never would have made it to the competition, let alone win first place. I was shaken. A simple, spontaneous act of mine had changed this girl's destiny. Dr. Carter. Maya suddenly stopped, a blush creeping up her neck, but her gaze was exceptionally steady. There's something I wanted to say for a long time. You've always been the dream guy for many of us female soldiers. I looked up in surprise, my own face turning red. Before, everyone thought you and Captain Sterling would end up together, so no one dared to think about it. She took a deep breath. But now I've won first place. I'm a captain too. I'm not any less than her. So I was hoping we could date. I had never met a girl so bold. Her sincerity seemed to stir something in my quiet heart. I looked at this earnest young woman, thought of the jar of salve and its strange journey, and the completely different path this life was taking. Captain Torres, I said softly, we could start by being friends. Maya's eyes lit up instantly. Yes, that's great. Sunlight filtered through the willow branches, dancing on her shoulders. I suddenly felt that my own mood, following this woman's smile, had also become brighter. After that day in the park, Maya became a frequent visitor to the hospital. Dr. Carter, Captain Torres brought you something again, a young nurse said with a smile, handing me a paper bag. It's a bag of butterscotch candies today. This is the first time we've seen a man who loves sweets so much. I ignored their teasing and took the bag without embarrassment. This was the 5th time this month. Sometimes it was fresh fruit, sometimes a new notebook from the base exchange. Yesterday, she even brought me a jar of hand cream because she saw a small crack on my hand. Is Captain Torres spending her entire paycheck on you? A colleague joked. I just smiled, but a warmth spread through my chest. In my last life, it was always me giving gifts to Claire. She would accept them with a polite nod, but had never once given me anything. In this life, there was a woman who, for my sake, ignored the teasing glances of others and the gossip swirling around the compound, all just to show me her sincerity. What had I, Ethan Carter, done to deserve the affection of such a woman? Without realizing it, I had grown accustomed to Maya's presence, to her lively, yet sincere care. One day, a female soldier rushed into the hospital. Dr. Carter, our Captain Torres has a high fever. She can't get out of bed in her dorm. I immediately grabbed my medical bag. How long has she been sick? 2 days. She just refuses to come to the hospital. I hurried with the soldier to Maya's dormitory. She was forcing herself to sit at her desk, reading a book, her face flushed with an unhealthy red. The soldier said cheekily, Captain, I brought Dr. Carter for you. Let's see if he can fix you. I felt a little embarrassed. Maya casually tossed a pillow at her. You little devil, go run 10 laps around the track. No way. The soldier dodged it nimbly and continued her report. Dr. Carter, Captain Torres has had a fever for 2 days and won't take any medicine. You have to do something about her. With that, she wisely slipped away. Maya awkwardly smoothed her hair. Sorry about that. That girl is always messing around. I'm fine, really. Sorry to make you come all this way. I looked at her flushed face and reached out to feel her forehead. It was scorching hot. You call this fine? You're burning up. You must be at 102. Feeling the cool, soft touch of my fingers on her forehead, Maya froze. The coolness felt like an electric current, shooting from her forehead straight to her heart, making her face turn even redder. She instinctively pulled back, her voice stuttering. I'm really fine. I was amused by her rare display of embarrassment, but I put on a stern face. Captain Torres, acting tough in front of Doctor is not a good habit. Without giving her a chance to protest, I pressed her back onto the bed and took a thermometer from my bag. Don't move. Let's get your temperature. Maya obediently held the thermometer in her mouth, her eyes following my every move as I bustled around. Her gaze was so soft it could have melted ice. I took out the thermometer and frowned. 102. How can you be sitting here reading with a fever this high? Maya smiled sheepishly. I just felt a little dizzy. I thought reading would distract me. I took out my case of filaments. Lie down. I'll give you a treatment, and then you need to get some sleep. Seeing my worried face, Maya suddenly felt that getting sick was worth it. She looked at the filaments in my hand, at me sitting by her bed, and then felt it was improper for a man and woman to be alone like this. She quickly said, Have you eaten? How about I go to the mess hall and get you some food? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Captain Torres, you're the one who's sick. Why are you worrying about me? Maya's ears turned red again. I was afraid you were hungry. In that moment, Maya was just a young woman experiencing her first crush. My heart softened, and my voice naturally became gentler. You need to take care of yourself first. When your fever breaks, we'll go eat together. Maya's eyes instantly lit up. Really? I nodded. When your fever's gone, you can find me at the hospital. The atmosphere in the small dormitory was warm. As I was packing my medical bag to leave, a photograph under the glass of her desk caught my eye. It was a picture of a young soldier in an old-style uniform. I suddenly froze. The face was so familiar. In my father's treasured old photo album, this same young soldier had appeared, his arms slung around my father's shoulders. Maya also looked at the photo. That's my father. He was killed in action when I was 10. My heart pounded in my chest. What was your father's name? Frank Torres. Maya looked at me, puzzled. Why? I pressed on eagerly. Did he have another name? A nickname? Like Rusty? Maya shot upright, her surprise evident. How did you know? That was my father's original nickname. After he died, the family said a hero shouldn't have a name like that, so they just used Frank. This photo, my voice trembled with excitement. Can I borrow it? After getting her permission, I rushed home with the photo and went straight to my father's study. I pulled out the treasured album and carefully compared the pictures page by page. It's really the same person. I murmured, my finger gently tracing the faces of my father and the young man in the photo. Ethan, what are you looking for? My father walked into the study. Dad, look at this. I placed the two photos side by side on the desk. I found Rusty's daughter. My father put on his reading glasses, his hands suddenly trembling. That's right. It's Rusty. It's really Rusty. His eyes turned red, his voice choked with emotion. I've been looking for his family for so many years. On the battlefield, if Rusty hadn't taken that bullet for me, I would have been the one who died. But I was the medic. I should have been the one to save him. Quick, where is his daughter? Take me to her. I quickly stopped my excited father. Dad, she's not just anyone. It's Maya. With the added layer of this special connection, the daughter of the man who saved my father's life, my marriage to Maya was quickly put on the fast track. Ethan, seeing you and Maya together, I can finally rest easy, my father said, patting my hand, his eyes full of relief. Now your old heartache can finally heal. My mother was happy for my father, too. I smiled at them. I really like Maya, too. Once the wedding date was set, Maya focused all her attention on me. After her father's death, her mother had also passed away early. She had been all alone, but now she finally had the warmth of the family again. Ethan, this is the pay I've saved up over the years. Maya pressed her bank book in my hand, her ears turning red. From now on, you're in charge of it. I wanted to laugh. Shouldn't I be giving you my paycheck to manage? Why are you giving me yours? People will think I'm living off you. I'd like to see anyone dare. If anyone says that about you, I'll take them on. I said you're in charge, so you're in charge. Don't worry about it. This is what I want. Seeing her fierce, protective look, I thought of my last life when everyone in the compound said I was living off my wife. Claire had never once defended me. I used to think she probably didn't know. Now I realize she knew. She just didn't want to. Looking at Maya's sincerity, I still refused. I'm the man. I can't take money from a woman. News of our rapidly developing relationship somehow reached Claire. One day, after finishing a long surgery, I dragged my tired body out of the hospital and saw Claire waiting at the entrance. She was in civilian clothes, which softened her military sharpness and added a touch of femininity. Ethan, she said directly, her brow furrowed, I heard you're marrying Maya Torres? I looked at her calmly. Yes, you should come to the wedding. Claire's tone was urgent. You're not right for each other. Maya, her personality is too impulsive, and her work in special ops is incredibly dangerous. If you really want to find someone, I know a few good women. She listed several names, all of them her loyal subordinates from our past life. I found it laughable. Did she still think she was the wife who could dictate my life? Thank you for the offer, but no thanks, I said flatly. Who I spend my life with is my own business. Seeing my resolute attitude, Claire's frown deepened. After a moment of silence, as if she had made a difficult decision, she lowered her voice. I had a dream. I dreamt that Maya had an accident during a mission. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to suffer the pain of losing someone you love. My heart skipped a beat. Vaguely, I remember my past life. Claire had attended a memorial service for a female soldier with the last name Torres who had been killed in action. Could it be? That person was Maya. I was suspicious, but looking at Claire's complex and unreadable expression, I couldn't be sure of her motives. But regardless, I didn't need her to arrange my life. Thank you for the warning. But who can say what the future holds? My tone was distant. I trust our command, and I trust Maya's abilities. You don't need to worry about it. I'm just trying to help you. I cut her off. There's no need. Claire, we both have our own paths to walk. Claire looked at my cold, distant attitude. Her lips moved, but in the end, she only said, if you ever need help with anything, you can come find me. I shook my head, my tone final. Let's not, Claire. It's better if we keep our distance from now on. I never told Claire that I had been reborn too. Maya's fate had already been changed by me, and I would do everything in my power to keep her alive. Maya and I got married. After our wedding, our bond grew even stronger. She never interfered with my work. In fact, she did everything she could to support my career. Ethan, isn't your hospital putting together a new research group for traditional and integrative medicine? I think you should go for the team lead position. I looked up and smiled. You support me continuing my research? Of course I do, Maya said seriously. Your microfilament therapy is a priceless skill. It shouldn't be wasted. Don't worry about things at home. I've got it covered. We looked at each other and smiled, a warm and comfortable feeling between us. Time flew by. In the second year of our marriage, a political storm hit the quiet military compound. One day, Maya came home from work with a grave expression. Ethan, General Sterling is in trouble. I heard he's being reassigned to a remote post in the Nevada desert. The teacup in my hand nearly slipped. What? I clearly remembered that in my past life, although General Sterling had been impacted by the scandal, he was only demoted. This time, the punishment was so severe he was being sent into exile. I put down a file I was reading. Let's go to Mom and Dad's. Maya and I went to my parents' house and found them, as expected, discussing the matter. My father's brow was furrowed. I'm afraid it's going to be tough for David this time. I went to see the old general today to try and put in a good word for him, but he told me explicitly to stay out of it. My mother sighed. David was foolish. How'd he end up on the wrong side? My father mused. If someone with influence could vouch for him at a critical moment, remind them of his wartime contributions, it's not impossible that he could get a lighter sentence. Then my father stood up. I'm going to make another call. Don't. My mother grabbed his arm. This political storm is huge. If we're going to help people, it's not just the Sterlings who need it. We can't help everyone. My father froze. After a long moment, he sighed heavily. You're right. Forget it. Hearing this, I understood everything. In my past life, though my parents never told me, they must have risked everything to help General Sterling for my sake. That must have been why my father lost his position as hospital director and my mother retired from her post as head of the arch troop, all to get his sentence reduced to a simple demotion. But in this life, we were no longer in-laws with the Sterlings. My parents wouldn't go to the same lengths for them. And so, the result was exile to the desert. This was the inevitable consequence of Claire's choice to be with Julian. Understanding this, I felt a mix of emotions. I remembered that around the same time in my past life, Mrs. Sterling had suffered a stroke from the stress of her husband's downfall and was left paralyzed. Back then, Claire was at a critical point in her career, favored by the top brass. After discussing it to support Claire, I had resigned from the hospital to take care of my mother-in-law full-time, completely abandoning my own career and becoming the man in the compound everyone called a mooch. This time, although I wanted nothing more to do with Claire, I couldn't help but think of the woman who had once treated me like her own son, and how Claire had genuinely been good to me when we were young. I couldn't bear the thought of what might happen. After dinner, I took my mother aside. Mom, I saw Mrs. Sterling the other day, and she didn't look well. With what's happened to the general, I'm worried she won't be able to handle the stress. I glanced at Maya, who was clearing the table, and lowered my voice. I don't really want to see the Sterlings right now, but to repay her for her past kindness to me, could you go check on her for me? Maybe persuade her to get a checkup at the hospital. My mother sighed. You're too soft-hearted, son. All right, I'll go first thing tomorrow morning. The next morning, my mother made a special trip to the Sterlings' house. She knocked for a long time with no answer. Fearing the worst, she pushed the door open. The scene inside made her gasp. Mrs. Sterling was lying unconscious on the floor, a shattered teapot beside her. The kettle on the stove had long since boiled dry. She rushed over and found that she had suffered a stroke some time ago. Her limbs were already stiffening. Eleanor, my mother cried, her eyes welling up as she began first aid. How could there be no one here with you? Although my mother got Mrs. Sterling to the hospital as fast as she could, by the time Claire and Julian arrived, it was too late. Auntie, my mom. Claire knelt by the bed, her voice choked with sobs. My mother shook her head gravely. We found her too late. Even a miracle worker couldn't. I'm afraid she'll never walk again. She was angry. Your father is under investigation and can't come back. With something like this happening, how could you and Julian leave your mother all alone at home? Claire closed her eyes in pain. When the news reached me, I was in my office at the hospital. My pen paused for a moment, but then I continued writing the prescription. Even being reborn, some things were beyond my power to change. With no one to plead his case, the official orders for General Sterling finally came down. On the day the transfer notice was delivered, I happened to be back at the compound to pick something up. From a distance, I saw him standing alone in front of his house, clutching the piece of paper that sealed his fate. His back was so stooped he looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "General Sterling," I said softly. He turned, and upon seeing me, managed a weak smile. "Oh, it's you, Ethan." I took an envelope from my pocket and discreetly pressed it into his hand. "Here's some money. Take it with you. Conditions are rough out in the desert. You'll need it." General Sterling held the thick envelope, his eyes instantly turning red. "No, I have." "Please take it," I said quietly. "It's better to have it and not need it. Life out there will be hard, but you have to take care of yourself. Remember, the sun will come out again one day." His hand trembling, General Sterling accepted the envelope, tears streaming down his face. "Ethan, I have so many regrets. It was Claire. She wasn't good enough for you. She let you down. If only I had." I quickly cut him off. "That's all in the past, sir. Please take care." Just then, Claire came out of the house with a suitcase. She saw me and stopped in her tracks. "Dad, it's time to go," she said, her voice hoarse. General Sterling looked past his daughter, at the empty space behind her, and his face hardened. "Where's Julian?" Claire lowered her head. He said he has an important surgery at the hospital today and couldn't get away." General Sterling let out a cold laugh. "Important surgery? He can't even spare the time to see his own father-in-law off." He pointed a trembling finger at Claire. "This is the man you were so desperate to marry? You pushed away a fine young man like Ethan for him. And now look. Just look." Claire stood frozen, saying nothing. The sun cast a long, lonely shadow of her on the ground. I shook my head and turned to leave. Even from a distance, I could hear the general's suppressed coughs and sighs. As per regulations, the Sterling's house was reclaimed. Since Mrs. Sterling was too ill to join her husband in his exile, Claire had to move her mother into the small apartment she shared with Julian. Moving day was bleak. Claire moved everything by herself. I saw her, but I didn't offer to help. The pitying and scornful glances of the neighbors were like needles on her back. "Look, even a mighty fall. Quiet, it's just sad." When the last box was moved into the tiny 150-square-foot apartment, Claire was so tired she had to lean against the doorframe to catch her breath. Staring at the crammed room, she felt the full weight of her family's fall from grace for the first time. "Claire, Mrs. Sterling said weakly from the bed, I'm a burden to you." Claire forced a smile. "Mom, I'm your daughter. There's no such thing as being a burden. It may be small now, but once I get a promotion, I'll apply for a bigger place." But the pressures of reality came crashing down. Claire discovered that the severance pay she had received when she left the service was all in Julian's possession. And ever since her father's trouble started, Julian had moved back into the hospital dorms without a word of explanation. The entire weight of their life fell onto Claire's shoulders. Every day, she had to come home to give her mother medicine, bathe her, and cook for her. Life became increasingly difficult. One day, as she was getting her lunch to take home, she was stopped by Brenda Jenkins from the logistics department. "Claire, you leaving work early every day is setting a bad example," the woman said, looking at her sideways. "What? You still think you're a general's daughter?" Someone else chimed in with a sneer. "She's the daughter of a political undesirable. Of course, she's got a big ego." Claire clutched her lunchbox, her knuckles white, but she could only lower her head. "Director Jenkins, my mother is bedridden. I really have to." The woman waved her hand impatiently. "Everyone's got problems. If you need to care for a patient, then file your resignation. Don't take up a spot you're not working for." The commander from her past life, when had she ever bowed her head to anyone? But in this life, she had to lower her proud head and force a smile for others. Only after they had had their fill of mocking her did they let her go. When she got home, her mother noticed her expression and asked cautiously, "Claire, is someone at work giving you a hard time?" Claire forced a smile and brought the food to her mother. "Not at all. Eat up while it's hot." Watching her mother struggle to swallow, a wave of bitterness washed over Claire. She remembered going to see Julian yesterday. The man who had once sworn to stand by her through thick and thin had given her two choices. Standing in the hospital corridor, Julian's voice had been icy. "Either you publish a statement in the paper denouncing your family, or we get a divorce. I will not allow either of us to quit our jobs to take care of a paralyzed old woman." Claire couldn't believe her ears. "Julian, those are my parents." Julian's voice rose with agitation. "And they will ruin my career." "Claire, have you thought about me at all? If I get branded with the same label as your father, our lives are over. I've worked so hard to become an attending physician, and I will not let that happen." "Claire, don't say I'm heartless. If you want to blame someone, blame your father's political affiliations. Blame your mother for being a burden." Looking at the face she had been obsessed with for a lifetime, Claire felt lost. This life, she had finally caught her light, But why was reality so far from perfect? In her past life, her family wasn't as prominent as mine, but they were stable. This life, her family was in ruins, while mine was thriving. In her past life, Ethan had willingly quit his job to care for her family. This life, Julian wanted to cut all ties with her parents. In her past life, she regretted missing out on true love for a lifetime. This life, she had rectified that regret, only to find herself longing for the warmth of her previous life's home. The aroma of cooking and the sound of laughter from other apartments drifted in through the window, making her small room feel even more desolate. As Claire quietly washed the dishes, she heard her mother whisper from behind her, "Claire, if only you had married Ethan back then." Her hand froze. Hot water splashed on her skin, but she felt no pain. This was the path she had chosen. No matter how hard it was, she had to see it through. Her paralyzed mother's speech slowly began to slur. Claire grew anxious, taking her to the hospital again and again, but the doctors said all they could do was manage it with medication and good care, hoping to slow its progression. Claire went to plead with Julian again. She couldn't accept it. She had been given a second chance. How could she let her life become so miserable? By then, a long time had passed since her father's incident, and it hadn't affected her. Julian seemed to relax. Out of consideration for their past relationship, he agreed to go home with her. Claire was overjoyed. She believed she hadn't made the wrong choice this life. The hardship was temporary. If they could just endure for a few more years, everything would be fine. In stark contrast to the gloom surrounding the Sterlings, my own life was becoming more brilliant by the day. I devoted myself entirely to medical research and practice. With the deep knowledge from my past life and the dexterity of my hands in this one, my skill with the microfilaments became increasingly refined. Combined with my family's secret formulas, I successfully treated several difficult and rare diseases and published a number of influential academic papers. I was no longer just a well-known doctor at the base hospital. I was a rising star in the national medical community. Awards and honors followed one after another. I stood on ever higher podiums, accepting praise and recognition from all sides. I was happy, genuinely happy. This life, I no longer had to look up to the achievements of my peers. I no longer had to spend my nights in sorrow over hands that could no longer hold a needle. Through my own effort and talent, I had earned the dignity and glory that came with the name Ethan Carter. No one introduced me anymore with the customary prefix, David Sterling's son-in-law. No one whispered that I was living off my wife. When people spoke of me, they said, "That's Dr. Carter," or "That's Director Carter's son. He's an amazing doctor." I was just Ethan Carter, an independent, capable, shining star in my own field. In our third year of marriage, Maya received a top-secret mission briefing. She stared at the bright red top-secret stamp on the file for a long time. The night before she left, Maya came home early and spent 2 hours bustling in our small kitchen. When I got home from work, the table was laden with all my favorite dishes. "What's the special occasion?" I asked, surprised, then noticed the deep worry hidden behind my wife's smile. Maya pulled out a chair for me, her voice unusually gentle. "I just wanted to cook for you." Throughout dinner, Maya kept putting food on my plate, her gaze often lingering on my face. I put down my chopsticks and gently took her hand. "Maya, is it a mission?" Maya froze for a second, neither confirming nor denying. She just squeezed my hand back. "Ethan." I placed my hand gently on her stomach. "Honey," I said, looking into her eyes, my voice soft but firm. "When you come back, let's have a baby." Maya's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Okay," she said, her voice hoarse. "Wait for me to come back." That night, we held each other, neither of us speaking, but our hands were clasped tightly together. The next morning, when I woke up, her side of the bed was empty. A letter lay on the nightstand, her familiar handwriting on the envelope. "To my beloved Ethan." The letter was short, just a few sentences, but it made my tears fall uncontrollably. "Ethan, when I come back, we'll have a baby. If it's a boy, we'll name him Aaron. If it's a girl, Serena. May we have a life of peace and serenity." Outside, the sun was slowly rising. I whispered, "Maya, you have to come back." A month passed with no word from Maya. One evening, my father came to my house, his steps heavy, a telegram clutched in his hand. Seeing his solemn expression, my heart sank. "Ethan," my father's voice was dry. "Maya is missing in action at the border." The teacup in my hand shattered on the floor. I remembered Claire's warning, remembered the fallen comrade with the same last name from my past life. Had the course of destiny been impossible to change, after all? I rubbed the ring on my finger. No, it can't be. She promised she would come back. I had to find her. Once the thought took hold, it was impossible to suppress. Are you crazy? My father slammed his hand on the table. Ethan, you're the backbone of this hospital. So many patients are counting on you. It's because I'm a doctor that I have to go, I said calmly, packing my medical bag. Conditions at the border are harsh. They need medical personnel more than ever. My father watched me in silence, finally sighing. Go then, but you have to come back safely. My mother, her eyes red, stuffed all sorts of medicinal herbs into my bag. You have to bring Maya back. The hardship at the border was beyond anything I could have imagined. I went as part of a volunteer medical team. During the day, I treated the wounded at a temporary aid station. At night, I went around with Maya's picture, asking everyone I could find. Have you seen this woman? I asked at every outpost, in every village. Everyone shook their heads. Another month passed. Still no word. One day, during a torrential downpour, I heard on my way back to the base that a local herb gatherer had rescued a seriously injured woman deep in the mountains. Ignoring everyone's advice, I set out into the mountains in the storm. I trudged through mud for a whole day and finally found the small wooden cabin just before nightfall. The moment I pushed the door open, I almost stopped breathing. Maya was lying on a crude wooden plank bed, her face as pale as paper. Her left leg was wrapped in rough cloth, stained with dark red blood. But she was alive. She was alive. I rushed to her bedside, my hands trembling as I examined her injuries. High fever, infection of the broken bone. After falling from a cliff, she had dragged her injured leg through the jungle for this long. Maya. I called her name softly, my voice choked with emotion. I'm here. As if hearing my voice in her unconscious state, her eyelashes fluttered. For the following days, I never left her side. I used the medicine I brought to bring down her fever, the filaments to ease her pain. I changed her dressing and fed her medicine every day. You're going to be okay, I whispered in her ear over and over. We're still going to have a baby and watch our child grow up together. Half a month later, one morning, Maya finally opened her eyes. The moment she saw me, she froze, and then tears streamed down her face. Ethan, am I dreaming? I held her hand tightly. It's not a dream. I'm really here. It turned out Maya's squad was ambushed on their way back from their mission. She was seriously injured and fell from a cliff while providing cover for her team. She thought she would never see me again. She never expected to wake up at all. After another 2 weeks, Maya's condition stabilized. I carried her on my back, step by step, out of the mountains. When she stood in the sunlight again, we both cried. Ethan, she whispered, leaning against me. Let's go home. Okay. I kissed her forehead. We'll go home and have her baby. 2 years later, Maya was holding our newborn daughter. Let's call her Serena, she said. After facing death, you realize how precious serenity is. Claire heard I had a daughter and sent a gift. Seeing the silver locket that my daughter had worn in my past life, I frowned, but I didn't refuse it. I occasionally heard news about the Sterlings. Julian did go back to them, but he could only endure taking care of Mrs. Sterling for a month before he couldn't take it anymore. The cramped apartment was constantly filled with the smell of herbal medicine. Mrs. Sterling, paralyzed in bed, directed all her resentment for their fallen fortunes at Julian. Jay Jinx, she would curse in a slurred voice whenever he came near. All your fault. Ruined my daughter. Julian would retort, Ma'am, be reasonable. What does my family situation have to do with any of this? It is you. Mrs. Sterling would slap the bed in agitation. If Claire hadn't married you, how could? Claire was caught in the middle. She knew better than anyone that their current predicament had nothing to do with Julian. It was the result of her own choices. But seeing her mother's suffering, she could only try to placate her. Mom, it's really not Julian's fault. Please take your medicine and get better. That's what's most important. To Mrs. Sterling, this sounded like Claire was taking Julian's side. Her cursing grew worse. Get out. Both of you get out. And from Julian's perspective, Claire's defense was weak and meaningless. One day, he came home from work to hear Mrs. Sterling muttering again. A married daughter is like spilled water. Ethan was so good. Julian finally snapped. Claire, I can't live like this anymore. I do my best to take care of her, but all she can think about is Ethan. You don't even argue with her. Do you regret marrying me, too? Claire didn't know if she regretted it. She only knew that this life was certainly not as good as her last one. But she still believed that these hard times were temporary. When the political climate changed, everything would be fine. But faced with Julian's outburst, she felt powerless. A life of constant arguing was not what she wanted. She looked at him helplessly. Julian, she's my mother. Julian exploded. I work myself to death every day, and I have to come home to this abuse. I can't take it anymore. Claire, you're already in a sinking ship. Just let me go. Let's get a divorce. Hearing the word divorce again didn't cause the same pain as the first time. For Julian, she had given up Ethan. She had refused help in the ruins and thrown away her career. For him, she had grown distant from her parents, making her sick mother's condition even worse. But she hadn't regretted it. She felt for Julian, for him having to live this hard life with her. But if they could just hold on, everything would be okay. She looked at Julian pleadingly. Julian, just a few more years. Everything will be okay. You can't let go of your mother, and I don't want to be the evil son-in-law. The best thing for us is to separate. Otherwise, I'll go crazy, and I don't know what I might do then. Despite Claire's pleas, Julian divorced her. Claire locked herself in her room and cried for a whole day. Even a woman as strong as her had a breaking point. She had been reborn and married the man she loved. Why had she ended up abandoned by everyone? In her last life, she had a successful career and a harmonious family. This life, her career was destroyed, and even her marriage couldn't be saved. She just made one choice. How did it turn out like this? She just made one choice, and why had she gained nothing? The next time I heard about Claire, she had been arrested for black market trading. By then, Maya was the commanding officer of her special ops group. When she heard the news, she sighed. Such a proud woman. How did she end up like this? I sighed softly. I guess that's just fate. In truth, under the policies of the time, Claire should have been sent to the remote posts in the Northwest. It was I who had asked Maya to pull some strings behind the scenes to have her sentence changed to local review. Not for her, but for her mother. If Claire had been sent away, the battered old woman would not have survived. After her release, Claire and her mother disappeared. They were gone for 10 years. 10 years later, one afternoon, I saw a familiar figure in the hospital corridor. Claire was standing by the window, thinner than I remembered, but with a new look of calm composure in her eyes. She walked up to me, her voice raspy with age. Ethan, thank you for what you did back then. I corrected her calmly. I didn't help you. I helped your father and mother. Claire didn't thank me again. Instead, she told me about her last 10 years. She had taken her mother south and built a new life for herself, becoming a successful businesswoman after the economic policies changed. But her mother had passed away and was buried there. As for her father, although he was eventually exonerated, his health had been broken. He passed away just a couple of years after his name was cleared, a full 30 years short of the 80 years he had lived in my previous life. Claire gave a bitter smile. In my last life, my regret was Julian. This life, my regret is my parents. Life is always full of imperfections. She was just musing aloud, thinking I wouldn't understand. But I replied calmly, there are no right or wrong paths in life, just different choices. As long as you felt it was worth it at the time, there's no need for regret later. In your last life, you held onto that regret for decades. Don't let yourself have any regrets this time. Claire's head snapped up. She saw the understanding in my clear gaze and realized. You came back too? I didn't speak, just nodded. Claire looked at me with a complex expression. Then, do you hate me? I shook my head. Why would I hate you? My last life was my own choice. I was responsible for all the consequences. Claire bowed deeply to me. I'm sorry for everything in this life and the last, but I have never regretted my choice. This time, I didn't step away. I accepted her apology. I knew that a woman as proud and strong as Claire would never regret her choices. After that, Claire left again. Maya and I walked hand in hand through decades of storms. We watched our daughter, Serena, grow up, join the military, and succeed. We witnessed the changes in our country and our times, always supporting and respecting each other. In our old age, Maya and I would often walk along the tree-lined paths of the military compound. The setting sun would stretch our shadows long behind us. Maya would hold my hand, which was still warm. Ethan, being married to you has been the greatest blessing of my life. I looked at her still bright eyes and smiled. And meeting you was the greatest fortune of mine. The next time I heard of Claire was in the newspaper. She had become a famous entrepreneur in the South, but she had worked herself to death, passing away at the age of 60. She never remarried and donated her entire fortune to the country. When I saw the news, I felt a twinge of sadness. She truly was a selfless person. I thought back to the day I was reborn on that dusty field of rubble, when I thought I'd lost everything. But looking back now, that was perhaps the moment I truly began to gain everything. I lost a woman who didn't love me, but I won an entire life for myself, a brilliant, shining life. I fulfilled my potential as a doctor, found a love that was returned, and witnessed my child's growth. This life, I, Ethan Carter, have no regrets.